Welcome back to the Silver Creek Insights podcast. I'm meeting somebody today for the first time, somebody whose work I've been a fan of for a long time. He's basically a legend in the data analytics space from Fitbit, HubSpot, TripAdvisor. He's the man on the back end. He's got leadership skills, practical skills, and a deep understanding of where this industry is going. Gordon Wong, it's nice to see you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jack. And thanks for setting me up for a fall there. Let's not disappoint our audience.
There's some audio problems that are going to come up during the interview, but Gordon is a very well spoken, thoughtful person, and I encourage you to just stay tuned and listen to him. I'll mute myself in case of any problems, but the conversation comes back in a very strong way at the end. It's something I'm really proud of. So, with that being said, thank you, Silver Creek Crawdads, for listening today. Let's get into it. Yeah, big shoes to fill, but I kind of want to start by getting to know you a little bit. What in your upbringing or your nature, your personality, drew you to data? Why is that something you've dedicated so much passion and time to?
Yeah, it's something that you don't realize you're going to go into, and then later on you realize it's so fundamental to your nature. My personality type is I'm really interested in a lot of different things. My focus shifts around. Turns out I'm ADHD, right? But for me, the way my manifests is I tend to have a wide vision. I can't help but see the big patterns coming down the pipeline. And in order to really make better predictions so that you have better outcomes, you need things like data, right? And like my focus is not such that I want to do one thing. I don't want to be let's say a marketing guru or a CFO. I want to be able to touch multiple things. So for me, it just pushed me in a direction where I need to build solutions to support others. And that's my personality type, right? I'm less of let's say a professional chef as someone who builds kitchens. I'm going to get you the ingredients. I'm going to make it safe. I'm going to make it high performing. I'm going to partner with you, right? But like, I really like building the studio where other people are performing, and then data is really about that, right? Data is about has potential, and you're trying to unlock that potential so that people can make better actions. So that's why I fell into it, and on a tactical level, I got out of college with degrees in psychology and philosophy, not super employable, but has something to do with thinking. And and I fell into this database project with no technical skills at the time that was building an enhanced 911 database. 911 is the emergency service in the US. And this database was about getting ambulances to people's homes when they were in trouble. So I was really fortunate that my first job out of school was something that had a social impact and also paid me. And that's an incredible place of privilege,
Nice.
right? That I get to be paid and I
Yeah.
get to do some good. And so I've just hung on to that all along the last 30 years. Right. So that's really what pulled me into this.
So,
I mean, why wouldn't I want to
yeah,
do
yeah,
this, right?
there's a lot to unpack there, but I want to start with the philosophy angle. Like you, I studied philosophy in my
Yeah.
undergrad, did sort of the great books program.
Awesome.
Certain authors really moved me, but by the time I graduated, I just wanted to be where the action was. I was kind of tired of discussing what is, or, the fundamental nature of reality. I wanted to make an impact in the world. But what philosophy shaped you, and how does that apply now? Or philosophers? I'd like some
Yeah.
names. Might be a short pause. Can
Yeah.
Did you hear me?
No, no.
Oh, good.
Well, it's interesting. It's still relevant, right? So, I guess the two or three of the philosophers was really interested in. And remember, like I said, I was ADHD, so I skated across a lot of different things, right? I mean, I was a physics major at one point. I was an economics major. I considered becoming a women's studies major, you know. But two philosophers really stick with me, and really at a kind of a high level. One is Immanuel Kant, and the thing that I really liked about Kant is that
Mm,
Kant defined, and this goes to data. It goes to data. Kant defined um, lying as a form of violence, right? Because what is violence? Violence is something you commit. What is it committed against a person to get them to do something they wouldn't do otherwise, right? Hey, give me your wallet, right? That's violence.
hmm
Well, if you trick someone out of their wallet, that's also violence, right? Right. So if you dig into
Yeah.
that, if you look at it from a philosophical perspective, the difference between physical violence and then manipulation via false data or knowledge, pretty darn similar, You're hurting people. And the funny thing, unfortunately, frequently false information from a violence perspective scales even greater than you can only mug so many people, right? Not to make light of that, but like,
Right.
you look at things like selling bad securities or Ponzi schemes or people like Bernie Madoff, right? That's violence,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think that sticks with me, right? So by trying to drive more availability to data. And my professional mission statement is you know is like, if you're talking to me in a bar and they say, "Hey, what do you do?" It's like, if I'm feeling like pontificating, I'm going to say, "Well, I try to drive better outcomes in the world through access to knowledge." That's my professional mission statement.
Nice.
And if you say, "Well, how do you do that?" It's like, "Well, I build data warehouses. I'm a technologist, and so on and so on." But at a high level, the point is, I'm trying to drive better outcomes through access to knowledge, right? And so by getting accurate knowledge out there to the people who need it, I feel like I'm combating violence, right? So that's one, Immanuel Kant. The other one is think about David Hume, and then David Hume just talks about, like, and this is less about data now, but he talks about the limits of rationality. David Hume at the time, is like many other philosophers, was being asked to empirically prove the existence of God. He ends the whole debate by saying rationality is a human thing. God, whether you believe in them or not, is by definition greater than data or observation. You cannot prove them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he just ends the debate. He just ends the debate. And the church is happy with this argument because, like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
God's greater than mankind. Okay, cool. They like that. Like that. The scientists are happy with it because they're like, yeah, that's right. We're not going to try to prove something that's impossible. So, but that reminds me that in my work, that don't be careful about decisions that you think are data driven, but you're actually making them on the basis of faith. It's okay to make decisions on the basis of faith in your business, maybe your intuition or what have you, but don't pretend they're data driven, right? And we see that a lot, right?
Right.
We see that a lot. Like, hey, give me a dashboard that justifies my confirmation bias, you know,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. That
and
is.
and as people who deliver messages, we get shot all the time. It's like, what do you mean this initiative is failing? That's not what I see. I'm like, well, okay,
Yeah.
let's partner on the analysis because right now the data says we're failing, you know, and that's a difficult conversation, right? Jack, I know you're struggling with technical difficulties, so I'll go a little bit further into that while you catch up. Yeah, I think anyone in this space is familiar with the expression data driven, right? And I actually personally don't like it. I use it all the time because it's descriptive and people understand it. You have to use language that people understand, right? You can't be too far or too different in terms of language. However, what is data? Data is just a measurement of a reality. It's a pseudo representation of reality, right? Like, hey, you have an e-commerce site, like, and you say, okay, hey, I want to show me the data. Show me all the sales for the last year. Sure. Here's a billion records.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do with it? Right? No one actually wants a billion records or however many, they're sitting in the spreadsheet. What they want to know is they want to know
Yeah.
things like which of our customer cohorts are underperforming relative to potential so that we could aim a marketing campaign at them so that we can make more money. Or which products are selling the best, but we're running out of inventory on, and so that we can place more orders in our factories in China, right? Those are the questions you're trying to actually answer. That's not data. That's knowledge and understanding, right? And it sounds like
Yeah.
semantics, but really data is, again, this measurement of reality. Knowledge is a derivation from that. You've come to an understanding. And an insight is a realization of what you should do, right? So knowledge by itself doesn't actually tell you what to do. It's getting there. It's getting there. But when we combine it with a human or algorithm or machine of some kind that's capable of taking action, you can get some insight, right? And I know we use these words sort of loosely all over the place, but that's the way I sort of define it. This spectrum of this concentration of value too, from data to knowledge to insight. And I think in my field, if I don't get you to insight, then I haven't done anything,
Mm.
right? Because you don't take an action that drives an outcome. All I've done is run the bills up. you know,
Yeah.
you know,
You built a
or
kitchen,
at least the potential for
but
an
there's
action.
nobody
Maybe,
cooking
like, I
dishes.
mean, when we interact with knowledge, we get a little bit smarter, right? So maybe you'll take a better action in the future, but we have to be aiming at that, so that's why I don't like the expression data driven that much, because it's cart before the horse in some sense. It's really not about the data. It's about the decision. And when you have that angle, it leads you to better solutions, right? Like when we work with clients,
Mm.
I don't immediately say, hey, I'm going to build you a data warehouse. What if you don't need one, right? What if that's not what you need? What if your existing solution
Sure.
actually has the data you need, but with some smart tweaks from our side? Maybe it's the visualization, maybe it's improving the quality, maybe it's putting tests in place for reliability, right? No, that's right. Okay, like I'm a cook. I love cooking, right? And you tell me you want to cook. Should I go get a 8 burner wolf, range and stick it in your kitchen? It might not be what you need. So, hmm. Jack, I see you're really struggling with it on the technical side. Maybe I could interview myself here. All right, I'm going to pretend you just asked me, what is the client's, what should people know about data these days? And I think what you should know is what we've always known. Or again, is that we should be focusing more on the business opportunities, the potential decisions to be made. Um, Jack, I'm interviewing myself, and I just asked myself,
You
what
do it.
should people know about
You're
data
my
these
favorite
days?
podcast guest to date.
Yeah, no, it sounds so much, and it sounds like things a little bit better on your side now, maybe. No, why should people come to us, or what should people know, right? I think that people should know the same thing we've always known, in some sense, that you want to be decision driven, right? You're a small retailer down the street. Uh, like you want to know what products are being sold. You want to know what should I order. You want to know how to please customers, right? Those are the kind of questions we should be driving toward, and then we can back into, well, how do we get to those decisions? What knowledge do I need? What understanding do I need to have? And then from there we can go into pursuing data. And maybe that's importing data and merging data sets together to create new possibilities, or maybe that's creating new instrumentation, right? Maybe we're not even measuring what we need right now. You know, if you're in the climate change world, the green tech world, sometimes they're struggling with actually getting the data to measure the impact of their solutions. Well, if you don't have that data, how do you know what impact you're actually having, right? And if you can't talk about your impact, how do you go get things like funding from investors, or how do you make money so you can pay your bills? So that's where I'm coming from, is like, I think we should be doubling down on those business decisions, figuring out the constraints, the blockers from getting it that keep us from making those decisions, and then understanding, boy, things are a lot easier now than they used to be. They're not trivial, but like the technology has really helped. A small elite team can move very fast and very agile. You know, Possibly 10x the speed of like larger, less aligned teams. Because some of the technology has really helped us, take out a lot of the friction. Like I was an early adopter of Snowflake, now all the way back from 2014, and what Snowflake freed me from was like setting up server rooms and configuring servers and building IO subsystems and all that stuff. I didn't need to do that anymore, right? But yet it looked just like a database. So it removed all this friction, right? It removed this friction. Similarly, tools
Yeah.
like from the BI side, your lookers, your sigmas, your omnis, your counts. These all enable me to do more by myself or with a small team than we were able to do, back 10 years ago, right? At a much higher speed, higher quality, higher observability, which is all what this is about, right? Building high quality solutions that allow you to continuously drive solutions. you know there is Be careful about the magic data model or the perfect dashboard. There's rarely one decision in your business that allows you to just suddenly make the double your revenue, right? If it was that easy, we'd all be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the value we get from data is about making a series of decisions continuously over time and getting that compound interest, right? Anyone who's ever done any investments knows that compound interest is really the way to go, right? You think that you might be able to find that one magic stock that gives you a 100x return, and we play that game of like, oh, if I only I could go back in time. But really, that's not the reality. It's about a balanced portfolio, getting that compound interest, and really having outsized returns over time. And that's what we try to do. It's like delivering better data, better knowledge, inspiring better insights, and driving better decisions. There's something ironic about this conversation too. Like, this is the kind of conversation that was impossible not that many years ago. The two of us are on different continents, you know, and thanks to technology, we can almost trivially communicate, except that reality does get in the way, right? And but the possibilities are there, and by being able to communicate like this, we can essentially join our two knowledge graphs, right? And make decisions that are possible by ourselves. And that's one of the things that I picture in my head, I kind of have like I have a very 3D view of knowledge and knowledge graphs. And I imagine like, hey, if I take this knowledge, let's say a weather report, and this knowledge, a map, each of them tells me something by themselves. But if I combine them, I can answer questions like, you know, where are the best beaches and what's the best day of the week to go to the beach? Right? The weather report gives me a prediction about the weather. The beaches, the map tells me how far the beaches are, and then I can just make a decision about the beach, going to the beach, or going skiing, or going for a picnic. Right? So, and that's like that's an example of how if you marry two knowledge graphs, you create possibilities that weren't there before. Right? So let's take it to the business side. You know, we help you wrap your hands around the marketing, your marketing efforts. Maybe you're getting a better return on marketing spend, so you're lowering your customer acquisition costs, right? Don't you want to acquire customers for less money? That's a great thing, you know. So
Absolutely.
that's a knowledge graph. But let's say also, hey, let's also try to identify those customers we shouldn't acquire in the first place because they turn out to be very expensive to serve. So we take that marketing data and we marry your customer service data. Now you create possibilities that didn't exist before. Right? Sometimes the best way to improve your marketing is is not acquiring more customers. It's stop acquiring the bad customers. You know, back in the old days, it was like the customer who comes in to open a bank account and gets the toaster, and that's all they ever do. Right? They get the toaster, they put $5 in there, and that's it. They're done. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the fault of the business for putting that teaser out there in the first place. You know, but at scale, how do we identify those bad customers or the ones? And the thing is, it's not just about us. When you acquire a customer who pays you for a little bit and then eventually stops using your service, pretty quickly, they had a bad relationship too, right? So I think it's angled toward my view of marketing is not to use marketing to create more value, the perception of more value. It's to find those people who would benefit from your product, and that's a great, healthy relationship on both sides. So that's a little bit of philosophy that I bring to my customers, right? Like, hey, let us help you find the people who would benefit from your product. You know, and if you've got a bad product, let us help you identify what's bad about it, right? But I'm probably not going to be super excited about helping you sell a crappy product. Just being honest right there, right? You know, and I'm definitely not going to help you
For
sell
sure.
cigarettes.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So,
So I can't tell if my audio's back on, but I've been listening intently to what you're saying. Gordon, are we
oh, good, you can
live
hear.
again? Good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've been listening and loving what you're saying. It's exactly the kind of content I want on the Silver Creek Insights. And you can have my job. You're good enough at interviewing yourself.
I
Um,
definitely enjoy this. I'm actually funny personality type. I'm a little bit of a shy extrovert. I like the spotlight, but
okay.
I'm not always comfortable in the spotlight. You know.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, you're clearly a natural at explaining what you care about in the spotlight. Um, where I would love to hear you talk about is you were an early adopter of Snowflake.
Hmm.
You've seen this industry take new shapes as things come in and out. Right now, I'd say ChatGPT deserves most of the credit for making AI interfaces something that are easier than to interface with and acquire information than just a dashboard used to be, right? I was a data
Right.
analyst. Bookcases were selling in Sweden versus France. Now I think you have this user interface, which is just talk to it like a person. And it's not
Hmm.
always right. It can actually provide you totally wrong information on AI. I'd say we're very much at the beginning, but where do you where do you see this going, and what's the role of data analytics? And last part to the question, in case I go out again, where do how do you as a data expert facilitate that successfully for companies that need to implement AI to stay competitive?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna like I'm gonna summarize it as moving to the right. We all as infrastructure and technologists and data people need to be moving closer to the business problem. And that's always been happening, right? I mean, we used to have mainframes and then we had, things like big data and so on and Hadoop, and those things were all too far to the left, too close to the metal, right? We want to move closer to the business problem. And that's what some technologies like ChatGTP, but other technologies that, like Snowflake with faster compute or Looker with its semantic layer have allowed us to do, to move to the right. My core competency 30 years ago when I started my career is I became a database administrator. I was a DBA, right? That job doesn't really exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could find, like if you need me to tune a Postgres instance, I could do that, right? I don't want that to be my job, and there's not enough work out there to do that full time, and it would be boring. No offense to
Yeah,
any
yeah, yeah.
Postgres DBAs out there, right? Because it's too far away from the business problem, and those jobs are getting fewer and fewer. You know, I get a lot of people reaching out to me on LinkedIn asking for career advice, and I like mentoring. And I try to make some bandwidth,
Mm-hmm.
especially for people earlier in their career. And a very typical conversation is going to be something like, "Hey, so I've got 2 years experience as a SQL developer." I'm like, "Okay, great, that's a good base. What else can you do?" It's like, "Well, I know a little bit of Python." Uh-huh. Okay, what else can you do? It's like, "Well, that's kind of it." I'm like, "Okay, so very bluntly, I don't have a job for you, right? Right? Because you've
Mm-hmm.
got, but I've got 2 years experience in SQL." I'm like, "Yeah, but you don't have any domain expertise. You don't know marketing. You don't know finance. You don't know product. You don't know how to solve any business problems, right?" And so you're highly dependent, 100% dependent on someone else bringing you the problem, and you don't speak their
Mm-hmm.
language. So they're going to have a hard time communicating with you, right? If you want to be in data,
True.
if you got to get closer to the business problem, you got to speak the language of business, right? If you're doing marketing analytics, go understand customer acquisition costs, go understand campaigns, go understand prospects, and then use your SQL knowledge to support those decisions, right? Partnering with your end users. And that's actually really always been the case, right? The people who are most successful, the ones who partner with the ones who have the outcome, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, like you go to a great restaurant, and if the server understands your needs, and partners with you on how to order, you get a better experience, right? And that person gets a bigger
True.
tip or whatever, right? Depending on what country you're in, right? But and we all know the stereotype of the highly egotistical chef who just serves whatever they think you want. Well, I'm not going to that restaurant.
Yeah.
You know, you don't see me as a customer. You see yourself as the customer, right? You're just using me. You know, you know. And so when
True.
we fall in love with technology and we just throw things at our users, we're showing them no empathy. We're just using them. You know, we may deliver some value, but that's probably going to be by accident. So I get pretty, and I'm pretty vehement about that, right? I mean, I want my teams to.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you're a service desk. It's that you seek to be a partner. You have to have empathy for your end users. You have to understand what they care about. You have to figure out how to alleviate their pain and drive their opportunities, right? Because we are ultimately usually not making the business decisions. I'm not running the marketing campaigns. I'm not signing up customers. I'm not developing product features, right? I am creating the potential for you to make better decisions. So I have to embrace that. And so, but okay, but thinking about where are we going with all this stuff? Well, again, I think with ChatGTP and other tools like that, they take a lot of the toil out of what we're trying to do. Even I use it sometimes, right? I'm like, oh, hey, I'm going to set these 5 users in Snowflake. I could do 10 minutes of typing, or I could tell ChatGTP to generate a SQL for me. And because I have expertise here, and this is really important, I can review that for quality.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so everything you do, you should be thinking about both output and quality. If you only have one, you're going to have some problems, right? So if your company only has revenue but doesn't have a profit margin, you're just going to lose money faster, even though on paper it looks like you're growing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So ChatGPT, it really helps us with, output, but you got to have the quality metrics in place too. How do I make sure this is correct? How do I prove this is correct, right? How do I make sure this query performs reasonably? Maybe it's syntactically correct, but it runs really slow and runs up your Snowflake bill, right? You still need to partner. There's that word again. Partner with the tool. Don't just turn over to everything to the tool, because otherwise you're running a real risk of like hurting your end users again, right? And so that's why I see right now, the stage of these technologies. I think they have incredible promise. I'm generally in favor of using them, but you have to partner with them. And so I'm careful, just like when we're talking about big data, everyone's talking about magic data model and so on and so on. That didn't exist. It was really about machine learning models that allowed you to make incrementally better decisions and remove toil. And yes, the decisions will get bigger and bigger. And And again, I think if all you know is SQL and Python, going forward, you're not going to have a job in a couple of years, right? You got to get close to that business problem and have that expertise, and maybe there's a future where we all don't have jobs, right? But right now, I think the real sweet spot of that graph is that partnership. And how do we go a little bit faster every single day, being aware that we don't go so fast that we hit a tree, metaphorically, right? You know, so just like everything else with like
I,
LLMs, I think about that. If you want to go fast, you still have to go a little bit slow.
with the right partners as well. There's the
That's right.
African expression: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with partners. Um,
Yes, yes.
I like what you said. I like what you said about domain experience. When it comes to things like misinformation, if you don't have domain knowledge, you'll be fooled by something like a chat GPT or a news site or a social media site telling you something. It takes domain knowledge to see through and to understand quality, right? To me, you
Right.
can have that output, but you won't necessarily have that quality unless you have the domain experience there. And so I'd love to just delve into it a little more. I hope AI is not overwrought for you, like something that's trendy now, but it'll move out soon. What's exciting you the most on the horizon?
Yeah, I do. I do. The promise of self service has always been out there. And then the great thing about self service is it unlocks your users, right? Now, I personally try to stay away from the word self service, and I think more like self sufficiency. And I know that's a little bit of semantics there, but self service too often turns into like, hey, we throw a solution at somebody and tell them to take care of themselves. That's not partnership, right?
Okay.
That's not partnership.
But we bill
What
them
I
as
want
well.
to do,
Here's a bill.
right? What I want to do is make you self-sufficient. And so I have to look at you as a decision maker. It's like, where is the constraint? What's the blocker? Do you not have access to the data? Do you not trust the data? Do you have trouble interpreting the data? Is it being presented in a way that's not clear? Right? Do we have a trouble? Do we have a problem with terms? Are we using lifetime value in 5 different ways? Right? And so those are the things I think that things like ChatGPT and so on can really help with. And but so like I'm thinking like going forward, like I'm looking at these just like the I want to simplify the conversation. Every company, every organization has to pay attention to at least two top line metrics, right? One of them is going to be value they deliver, right? We call it customer value, we call it all these various things, but they must be producing something, and they also need some sort of financial health. And maybe it's dollars, maybe it's something else, right? But you're going to consume resources to produce something, basic cost of goods. You know, you need to be healthy in order to continue delivering that value. So nonprofits struggle with this a lot, right? Because frequently people are coming in without a ton of business experience, and they're focused on the value and they're passionate about it, right? But if you're not financially healthy, if you don't have a source of funding, you're not going to be around to deliver that value. So just earlier we were talking about outputs, like output and quality, right? In that view, your output is your customer value, right? But financial health is the quality metric that you have to control to maintain the first one. And you can flip it around if you're a more for-profit organization, like, hey, I'm trying to maximize profit. In order to maximize profit, I have to have at least a certain amount of customer value, right? But it's a matter of emphasis. But getting it out there and being able to see those things simplifies the decisions. I can't tell you the number of times I've been talking to a client and said, hey, what's your primary measure of value? How are you serving your customers? All right, how does it relate to your financial health? And they have a big long explanation, but like that should be a simple conversation. You know,
Hmm.
that should be really simple. It should be like, hey,
Absolutely.
so we deliver this kind of value right now, and here's our profit margin, and we decided we want to deliver more value, so we lowered our profit margin. Or, hey, we're delivering so much value, we realized we could take more profit. That's the kind of conversation you should be having, and that's powerful, really powerful in a business. You know, when you say to your workforce, your team, it's like, hey,
Hmm.
we're growing really fast right now, but we're growing so fast, we're starting to take on some lower quality customers, and we're also beating up our customer service team. But we're going to, as a company, decide to grow a little slower, be a little bit more selective about which customers we take on, and take some of the pressure off of customer service so they can staff up and maintain that quality. That's a powerful coordinated conversation, right? And that's a combination of marketing plus customer support. and you need both sets to see that.
To me, there's no strategy that you could implement as a business leader if you don't have this sort of data, right? To know, I mean, this is a fundamentally MBA strategic decision. Is there too much pressure on customer care? Do we want to be a higher quality company versus lower growth? You don't even get to start having that strategy unless you know what the data says, is the thing. You can
Right.
tell yourself in the mirror, I'm a high quality company that just grows quick too. And like, no, there's sometimes a direction you need to choose.
I agree. I agree. And it's about simplifying it, I believe. We've got to respect how difficult it is to work together at scale, especially with COVID, especially with remote, right? Every big
Mm-hmm.
business should be trying to become a small business in some sense, function like a small business, right? Small businesses understand their metrics much better, partly because they're able to observe them. Fewer number of people to coordinate, so on. Like so, down the street, there's an Italian grocery store, right? I'm lucky enough to live a block away from some awesome shops. It's called Capone's. The
Lucky.
owner of the place is literally, his name is Al Capone, literally Al Capone, right? If I was teaching an MBA class on being
Nice.
data driven, I would take this class down to Al's place and talk to him like, "Hey Al, can you tell me what your best selling product?" Absolutely, he can. All right. What's your margin on that? Yeah. What's the lead time on trying to get more inventory? What are the products that that you have to order ahead? Which ones are riskier, but potentially if they sell, they have a good margin, right? He knows all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? Hey, if I ask him, should you potentially open, change your hours on your store? How well tuned are you right now to serving your customer base? He might need to change it, but he can definitely have an intelligent, data driven conversation about how well the hours of his store are serving his customers and his ability to staff and all that stuff, right? But he can see all of it. It's all in one
Yeah.
place. Yeah, that's what bigger business. That's what we're trying to do as a bigger business. Get this same kind of clarity these small businesses have, but because it's so hard to coordinate, we need to use technology to help and processes and common language and so on. Right? The marketers got a ton of stuff they're trying to do, run these campaigns, maybe a huge budget. They don't have any visibility on customer support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you bring it to them, or unless you're at a level higher where you're saying, "Hey, I care about these two things, so you get to do this, but we're going to have this feedback mechanism." Like, okay, we're going to keep an eye on the customer support queue. If that gets too long, we know that's going to hurt our customers, and in the long term, that's going to hurt our business, right? You
Right.
know, so and
But
trying to get that clarity, trying to simplify the conversation.
I I've never heard that before about Capone's, and it's such a great. It's counterintuitive that every big business should become like a small business. Should become like Capone's, where he knows the neighborhood, he knows his customers, his products, and it isn't as many as like McDonald's or some franchise big company. It's the corner store Capone's, but with
Right.
proper data and uh, I won't say data driven. I'll say with proper understanding of your data, you can make a big corporation become more like Capone's, right? That's
Right.
the kitchen. That's the tool set you're providing for customers, right?
That's right. That's right. And I've been fortunate enough to see a lot of clients, right? Because I did independent consulting and then I worked in professional services groups that, we had lots of clients. So I've probably been at, gosh, 500 sites, right? There was 10 years I was a road warrior. And you see the patterns. The places that had clear vision, had clear metrics, those are the ones that are coordinated. Those are the ones who are more successful. They understood. There's the famous story of Alcoa, the aluminum manufacturing plant. I can't remember the name of the CEO, but who came in and just said, "My number one focus is safety. That's all I care about: safety, 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 worker safety." Right? And literally, he announced this in an investor meeting, and where people were running to the phones to say, "Hey, we got to sell this stock." Well, that was the beginning of a massive run up in the success of that company. Right? Um, he had a very simple vision, but he recognized that safety was the quality metric that was holding back everything else. Right? They're trying to produce more stuff, but people were getting hurt, which is in turn hurting the business and so on and so on. And by enhancing safety, they unlocked the ability to produce more.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
By hiring more customer service people and being able to predict that queue and understand or making their jobs easier, it allows you to sell more stuff.
Yeah.
Right? You know, So that, and they all go together.
It's true. Like I love the Alcoa example because I'm a big believer that you can do anything you want, not necessarily everything you want. And I've seen companies that have their like 27 priorities. And you're like, oh, very,
That
very
means you have no
prioritized.
priorities, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Quality, costs, sales, blah blah blah. It's and when you get to a certain size though, it does feel like, well, we have a sales division, we have a marketing division, we have HR. We need each one of them to feel in, there's things to be done, frankly, in all those things. But
yeah,
I like the
yeah.
idea of the leadership coming in and like picking, like, what direction are we going now? Are we about safety? And it might scare the investors to say, oh, they're not about profits, they're about safety. No, if you
Right.
drill in on this, you can use safety to become significantly more profitable applied properly.
But absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And when you understand your metrics and your capabilities of your business model, maybe this year you didn't turn a profit, but maybe that's by design, right? Because you were taking the profits, the cash flow tossed off by your business, and hopefully you got to be producing cash and you're reinvesting it. But the fact that you could be profitable if you needed to is incredibly powerful, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you are profitable and you understand your cost of goods, you understand things like, hey, what happens if a competitor tries to move into my space? Like, oh, well, I have this amount of margin to play with to block them out, right?
Yeah.
That's powerful, you know. But if you don't understand your margin, if you don't understand, and if your company doesn't, organization doesn't understand it, you've lost that. You're losing that agility. You know? So,
Okay. We're running out of time here, but I'm curious what percentage of managers do you think are just kind of bullshitting it on hunches, right? Like things are going their way, they're taking the credit versus like no, they're implementing a vision based on some understanding and they're doing their best to turn it into a Capone's as best as they can. Do you
yeah,
I'd imagine it's not one or the other, but have you seen managers make that switch effectively as well?
I think most of us are actually, myself included, at times, are just sort of we're doing things the default way, and the default way is just work harder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out, and the default way is the hard way, right? The easy way takes more planning. So for instance, using a metaphor, let's say you and I are hiking up a mountain. You're near Kilimanjaro. Well, the easy thing is just start hiking, right? That's the default
Okay.
way, but it's not
Sure.
that easy is hard, right? You should be
Yeah.
doing some planning, right? Your shoes, your pack, your whatever, your map, and all that stuff, weather reports, right? Don't get going right away. But most of us as managers, maybe it's a little bit performative, and maybe because again, this remote world, we need to be demonstrating our value. We tend to lean toward the default way, which is actually the harder way, right? Stepping back, saying what you're going to do, building a plan, saying what you're not going to do can be really dangerous and threatening. You know, at HubSpot, we had the do not do list, right? Every year we did these compass stories. We chose what we're going to do, and then we put things on the do not do list as well. And these were high value things that are well researched, but we chose as a group that we're not going to do this year. So don't do them, and don't let it rob your focus from the things we did say were even higher priority, right? But that's dangerous, and it's threatening, and people are going to be upset. Like, well, this thing is super important. We have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. These other things, which one of those you could choose not to do? All
Right.
right. And have that decision. And that's going to, and that's harder as opposed to like, oh, I'll just do whatever's most urgent. So I think as many, that's what, in some ways, that's what we're trying to do as data people. We're trying to allow people to be more deliberate, more intentional, push that planning horizon out further, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like investments, you know, and so that your managers don't, we're not just working harder, you know. I've been at so many businesses where their plan for that year, they're already failing, and their plan is to work harder. It's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. And if you want to get really nerdy, right now there's a whole conversation in the analytics world talking about statistical process control, and it's all about like, hey, if you're in a static system, this is the range you're in. If you don't change anything, you're going to stay here. You get some temporary movement, but unless you change something, you are not going to
Mm-hmm.
get out of this range, right? Just working harder doesn't work. You know, got to work easier, right? Not even just smarter. We got to work easier, right? How do you spend
You were
less
well out
resources to get better
You
right?
out nerded me with that joke. I'm like, okay, I think I got it. Like, if you don't change something, the statistical, but
Statistical process control, yeah. And I'm not, I know this much stats, but there's some good thinking out there right now. And it's like it's funny. My wife is a PhD, MIT, does systems engineering, and so on. They talk about things like statistical process control and systems engineering all the
sure,
time. And then funny, I'm in data and knowledge, and we're just barely touching on some of these concepts, right? You know, and whereas we should be all over that stuff.
well, I want to be respectful of your time, but I'd actually love if you could just touch on sort of where there's overlap, and as much as you know about the MIT academic realm, a little bit more of
Mhm.
statistics versus, like, I mean, you're where the metal or the rubber meets the road in a sense. It's very practical what you do. But getting back to the beginning of our conversation about philosophy, I do think a lot of the academic side of things forms the ideas and the direction and the development of the whole industry.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's there is so in launching spacecraft, and like other, this is true really for any machinery, right? Or any solution. There's this notion of both static and dynamic tuning. So static tuning is things you build into your solution ahead of time based on your understanding of what's out there, the environment, right? So I'm launching a spacecraft. I have some predictions about based on experience of what's out, what, low Earth orbit's like, what vacuum is like, exposure to radiation, sun, all this stuff. So I engage in some static tuning, right? Right, based on what I know. But if you put all your effort into static tuning, you have no flexibility to adjust for the unknowns, right? So what you do then is reserve some capacity. You build some flexibility in the system. That's dynamic tuning. So hey, I don't know what things are going to be like up here. I have a prediction of what the potential range is. Let me reserve some capacity, put dynamic tuning in there. That's flexibility. But if you put all your capacity into dynamic tuning, then your overall performance is going to be very low, right? And so you use a more terrestrial example. Think about cars. Ferrari, highly tuned in one direction, right? Top speed, maneuverability on a track. Probably wouldn't do super well at Kilimanjaro, you know.
Hmm.
Whereas I can get like a, badass dune buggy with double
Defender.
tires and all this stuff and all these things. But it can go anywhere, but its top speed is going to be pretty low, right? Its mileage is going to be horrible. So what is that? Where's that sweet spot in the middle, right? And then so in that field, my wife's PhD is about this. She was able to work on like mathematical models that allow you to find that sweet spot in between balancing between static and dynamic tuning to sort of maximize your output over time. You know, your investment portfolio is probably similar like this too, right? If you have one, if you're lucky enough to have one, right? You get some bonds that are very static, very static. They have very predictable return, but you might have some bets in there as well, right?
Hmm.
And
Yep.
so, and you're trying to find that kind of sweet spot in the middle to match your needs, right? That's that influences my thinking a lot in terms of building stuff for our customers.
Hmm.
You know, what are those things we really know about, we really understand really well, we're going to optimize for, we're going to make that's a sure bet. But where do we need to reserve capacity in case something changes? Like maybe there's a massive pandemic that comes down the pipe, you know,
Yeah.
right? Or there's a, or there's a huge land conflict in Europe, right? These are things happen that you can't always predict for. So you do need to reserve. If you're going to protect yourself from real failures, you need to preserve some capacity, you know. So that's a, and then so when you get into things like systems engineering and so on, right? They're saying, hey, we got all these different variables here, right? And then and just depending on a human's insight to figure out which ones to optimize is probably going to fail, right? At some point, we need to use some math. We need to do some data, right? We do some modeling and say, okay, if I move this variable, oh, I didn't know that this one would have this reaction, right? It's pretty easy to look at like, you know, cost versus revenue and cost as a percentage of revenue to figure out my profit by itself. But it's not that simple normally, you know, right? How does the weather, if you have a restaurant, if you have a catering business, how does the weather affect your business? And to what degree?
Sure.
And how should you change your inventory so that you don't have food spoiling relative to that weather, right? If you've got 20 years experience, maybe maybe you can just cut your way through it. But what if you're not the one making the decision? What if you have to hand off the ordering to a new employee who's got 1 year experience? Knowledge
This is
products allow you to enable more people to make decisions. So it's not just better decisions. It allows you to unblock your business by enabling more people to make that decision, right?
That's what
And
every
that's
business
powerful,
leader wants. Yeah, it's how do I delegate? Is basically because is the
right?
guy I hired to make
Delegate
that
safely.
decision making the decision I would make? Like it keeps us up at night, you know? Like
Yeah,
did I and assuming my decision would be correct anyways as the business leader, but you need to be able to in order to delegate effectively, we need to be looking at the same uh, inventory of Capone's Italian, basically, right? Make it something that
that's
we
right.
can all understand.
And let's not, and maybe we need to be a little bit, maybe we need to temper our ambition a bit. Like, so maybe I'm the owner of a business, I'm expert at making this decision, and I want to delegate to somebody else. I don't need them to make the exact same decision. They're not me, but I need them to make a decision I'm okay with. That's good enough,
Mm-hmm.
And so where's that threshold? And so so that's part of providing knowledge products that you have, you enable people to make that good enough decision and create some telemetry or a record of the decision so you can go back and look at it and improve. You know, my friend Al down the street's got 5 daughters, right? They all work on different parts of the business. Not all of them are there, but like they all work. They're not all going to make the exact same decision all the time, but they make decisions that are good enough. They're well aligned, and they don't make decisions you can't recover from. Right? That's part of
Yeah,
agile, is that we try to avoid the unrecoverable decisions. We shorten our horizon, right? We take smaller bites and so on and so on, so that is, as opposed to making that huge decision that you can't come back from.
right. So I really want to visit Capone's. First of all, like I think Harvard or MIT, Sloan, the business school needs to just case study this bad boy. Very, very
You're down the
good
street.
example
Right?
you
I'm a
give us
mile
there.
from each of them.
All right, all right. Well, I'll leave it to you to get that case study started. But I want to say thank you for being flexible with the IT, but much more for such a thoughtful discussion of data. I hope this is the first of a few conversations we have.
Yeah, absolutely, Jack. It was totally my pleasure. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I hope to do it again.
Great. Well, if you ever want to visit Serengeti or Kilimanjaro, I'm your guy, but I'll talk to you again soon, I'm
I do
sure.
want to.
All right.
All right, all right. Cheers, Jack. Have a
Cheers.
good evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
All right. I'm going to just record here.